First things first, Mikaela, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm alright, thank you. So before we jump into your EP and the music you've been making, I'd love to jump back to the beginning quickly. And now you just told me you grew up in a studio. Is there one memory that sticks out from kind of growing up there?
I once shook Missy Elliott's hand.
Okay.
So that was monumental.
How old were you?
It's probably like 10.
Okay.
That changes you. That changes the whole game.
Well, you were only 10, but at that point, what did music mean to you?
It was like, it was just a part of my environment. I was constantly surrounded by music, by bands. They would come to the studio and sleep on the couch, you know, and like I just knew it to be like my truth. Like it was always present. And my dad was always making music, and it was always playing in the house, and we could hear it through the walls, and I was constantly surrounded by music. And
at that age then, do you gravitate towards what you hear around you, or is it kind of a rebellious thing, right?
For me, it was like my family listened to rock music. I loved rock music. That's all I wanted to do, was be a rock star.
So the first instrument was a guitar? You
Drums.
tried? Okay.
And then guitar.
So that was the plan.
I was really into drums. I think it was just like an aggressive, like I just wanted to like bang around. But I ended up playing guitar, dropping drums, and then playing piano and bass.
And I suppose at this point it's maybe too young to tell, but was there an intent in what you were doing?
I realized the intent when I was like 13 or 14. But when I was young, it was mostly just expression, just like expressing myself. But I knew that from a pretty young age that this is what I wanted to do.
What happened at 13 that's kind of...
I was in high school and I was sitting in class and I was just like, I hate this. I was like, all I want to do is play music. So I started to take sessions and do work outside of school, and it became a job really quick.
Did you write and perform your own songs already at that point?
I didn't play live shows as much, but I was always writing and always recording, and I would send people songs that I wrote.
Do you remember maybe the first couple of songs that you wrote?
Definitely in high school, when I was starting to like have feelings for people and you know, emotional teenager, I was like writing songs, and I was like, I would like send them to people, and I'd be like, I wrote this about you. They'd be like, what the fuck? Stop writing songs about her.
But I can imagine, especially, I mean, for people still, but what did writing music and songs do for you? Because getting those thoughts onto paper and kind of into something tangible, that must have been something interesting.
It felt like a sense of completion. Like I felt like I could really finish something and do something. It also felt like free therapy, because I could just, you know, get it all out. I was very emotional as a kid. I needed that. That outlet was so essential. It still is. I still find myself like writing and immediately feeling like a full release.
But so do you have to be in a certain mood or a certain mindset to write?
I definitely don't push myself when I'm not like in the mood. But it's gotten to a point, especially because I produce, where I can sit down and like if I have like a plane ride or whatever, I'm just like producing out shit on my laptop, and then I can always go back and write to it later. So it's really moved from just sitting at a piano and doing something to like, now I have different methods. There's certain days where I write really cathartically, specifically because I'm feeling a certain way, and then there's certain days where I'm like, I really am interested by this sound. Like I'm gonna produce something that sounds like this, you know?
Well, I want to get back a little bit to kind of how you started, because then you know kind of, okay, school is not the right thing for me, I want to make music. When did it become serious for you? When did you think, okay, but I can actually do this?
I started to take meetings when I was like 11 or 12 years old, and then when I was in high school, I started to get flown out to like LA to work or like take meetings, and I knew at that point that I was like good enough to.
Well, yeah, you mentioned. I think you were offered a record deal at 11?
I was offered a deal of some sort. I wasn't a record deal. I was like, but I was taking label meetings. And I think that what was interesting about that is when you're young, you don't really know yourself. And then you're put in a situation where people are like, we get it, we know you, we understand. And I'm like, well, I don't know me, you know what I mean? And I was so grateful for those experiences, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the people I was working with at that point. And I think that the best thing I did was I met people who were willing to spend time introducing me around, throwing my name around rooms and getting into sessions with artists and writers and whatever. And also just finding like a management team and a label that I felt really like just understood what was going on and gives me the space to do whatever I want. You know, there isn't any pressure from any.
At that age, when you get flown out and everything comes, it must be quite impressive when that happens to you at the young age.
It's impressive, but I was already so jaded because I grew up in a studio, and what would happen was bands would come through and they would write music, and I'd be like, this fucking music is amazing. And then the label would get involved or whatever, and something would happen, and my dad and I would listen to the final product, and we're like, what the fuck is this? Like, music would just get fucked up, you know, and I think that it was, I watched so many talented people just fucking go down the drain. And I think that that was the best training, you know?
Well, I was going to say, because is that why you thought, well, let's hold off on it, let me develop myself as a person?
Yeah, I felt that if I didn't know exactly what I wanted my shit to sound like, and I didn't know who I wanted to be involved, and I didn't know, you know, what my production sounded like, I had no place signing a record deal. So when I knew I was ready, that's when I started working with Mark Ronson.
Do you remember that period where you kind of felt like you figured it out?
Yeah, it was when I got to college. I did a year of college, and I wrote the EP, and I was like, this is it. Everything started to sound cohesive.
Because is it a sonic thing, or is it more to do with lyrics, or how
it's sonic, it's writing. It's also like when you go through some shit and you're like, I wrote 5 songs that feel all connected to the same thing. Like that's, I really like, I remember sitting with the EP and just being like, this is it.
And well, let's go into the EP then, because I think one of the things that's kind of instigated them maybe is a breakup. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So,
that's fair to say.
So that, do you remember that mindset that you were in, and what kind of
depressed,
made you write?
Sad, depressed, horribly sad.
But a song like Talia, then, how does that start?
I was sitting in the practice room of my dorm in college, like our dormitory, and I was crying, and I wrote it in 10 minutes. And I was like, okay, it's done. I felt so much better after.
Well, I was going to ask, does it help? Kind of, you mentioned the word catharsis, so.
It was so helpful. Like, to be in that moment, I was so sad and so lonely, and I'd moved across the country, away from my family, away from my friends, and I just needed to write about it, and I wrote Talia.
But I can imagine writing a song like that and then performing it as well can be quite confronting in a way.
It was. The first few times I performed it, I was like, I hate this. Now I love it because I can find the fun in it, and it's dancey and it's fast, and so I think it's really fun. But at the beginning, I was just like, like it was so horrible.
Well, that reminds me of something else. You mentioned that you didn't really perform early on. So when did you start performing, and how did you take to it?
I always performed a little bit, but I wasn't the type of kid who was like doing gigs around the city. Like I was mostly in the studio. Like I was always a studio kid. So it was out of my comfort zone to play the first few shows. But I knew I was good at it because I love performing. I wasn't practiced. Like I just didn't know. I didn't have the same comfortability as I do in a studio. So it took a few times, like, for me to really get into it. But luckily, I had a really good band of kids I love, and I have my team who's like, it's fine, we're just gonna have fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I got into it. Now I'm so comfortable. I really enjoy it.
So the pressure's off.
Pressure's off. I mean, it's like there isn't any pressure. It's like you just do your thing.
Fair enough.
If people don't fuck with it, it's like,
Fair enough.